The sheriff knocked at exactly 8:12 in the morning. I remember because I was halfway through answering emails with cold coffee, sitting beside my laptop, and my dog barking like someone was trying to break in. I wasn't expecting anyone. Definitely not law enforcement. Definitely not what happened next. When I opened the door, the first thing I saw wasn't the sheriff. It was my landlord, standing 3 feet behind him, hands in his pockets, looking satisfied. Not angry, not frustrated, satisfied. The kind of look people get when they think they've already won. "Ms. Bennett?" the sheriff asked. "Yes. We're here regarding an eviction order." Eviction. I actually thought he had the wrong apartment. "There has to be some mistake," I said.
If you love Reddit revenge stories, subscribe. I post one every single day.
The sheriff glanced down at paperwork. Apartment 3B. My apartment. My actual apartment. "No," my landlord said, calm, almost cheerful. "No mistake." My stomach dropped instantly. Wrong. Very wrong. I'd paid rent 4 days early, every month, for almost 2 years. No complaints. No missed payments. No lease violations. Nothing. "You have until 5 o'clock today," my landlord said. 5 o'clock. Today. My pulse climbed instantly. Fast. Wrong. "No," I said carefully. "There has to be paperwork missing." The sheriff looked uncomfortable. Interesting. Very interesting. My landlord folded his arms. Confident. Too confident. "You should have thought about that before violating your lease." Violating my lease. Interesting. Very interesting. Because I hadn't. Not once. Neighbors had started opening doors. Watching. Whispering. Perfect. Humiliation, pressure, public embarrassment. Classic intimidation tactic. My landlord liked intimidation. I'd learned that 6 months earlier. Back when he bought the building. Back when everything started changing. "You can appeal later," my landlord said. "But by 5 o'clock, no. Quiet, sharp, controlled." He stopped talking. Good. Very good. Because suddenly, something felt wrong. Not emotionally wrong. Legally wrong. Dangerously wrong. I held out my hand. "Can I see the paperwork?" My landlord smiled. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, I knew. People get very confident right before they make expensive mistakes. The sheriff handed me the documents. I scanned the first page, then the second, then the third. And suddenly, my landlord wasn't the person most nervous standing in that hallway anymore. Because what he didn't know, what nobody standing there knew, was that he'd broken housing law 6 separate times before breakfast. And I happened to know exactly how expensive that mistake was about to become.
6 months earlier, my apartment felt like peace. Real peace. The kind you don't appreciate until life takes it away once and gives it back later. I moved into Maple Terrace Apartments 2 years before everything exploded. Small building, 12 units, brick exterior, old trees, quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy, which was exactly why I loved it. After my divorce, quiet mattered. Stability mattered. Predictability mattered. I worked remotely as corporate counsel for a healthcare company. Long contracts, compliance reviews, policy work. Not glamorous, not television lawyer exciting. Mostly emails, deadlines, documents, coffee. Too much coffee. Apartment 3B became my reset button, my safe place. My dog, Charlie, loved the bay window. I loved the silence. Mrs. Ramirez downstairs baked something with cinnamon every Sunday. A retired teacher named Walter watered plants outside every morning at exactly 7:15. People smiled. Neighbors knew each other. Normal. Safe. Good. Then Martin Holloway bought the building. Everything changed. Martin was mid-50s. Expensive watch, perfect haircut, developer type. The kind of man who spoke too confidently about things he didn't fully understand. The previous owner retired, sold the property. Martin took over 3 weeks later. At first, he seemed fine, friendly, professional. "We're making improvements," he told tenants, "modernizing, adding value." Corporate words, dangerous words. First came parking fees, then storage fees, then maintenance delays. Small things, easy to ignore, easy to explain away. Then people started leaving. Apartment 2A, gone. 4C, gone. 1B, gone. Fast. Too fast. Interesting. Very interesting. Mrs. Ramirez mentioned it first. "He wants higher-paying tenants," she whispered one afternoon. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because housing markets don't need landlords to say quiet things out loud. They just need pressure. Martin liked pressure. I noticed little things. Maintenance requests disappearing, emails ignored, phone calls unanswered, repair delays. One tenant lost air conditioning for 9 days. Another complained about plumbing. Nothing happened. Interesting. Very interesting. Then, one Thursday evening, I came home and found Martin standing inside my apartment. Inside my apartment. No notice, no emergency, no permission. Charlie was barking. My pulse climbed instantly. Fast. Wrong. "What are you doing?" Martin turned casually. Too casually. "Checking something." "No. No, no, no. Housing law, lease agreements, notice requirements, privacy rights. Dangerous thing about being a lawyer, you notice things. Specific things. Expensive things. You can't enter without notice," I said carefully. He smiled. "Interesting. Very interesting. Relax." Dangerous word. Very dangerous word. Because people who tell you to relax usually know exactly why you shouldn't. That was the first moment. The first crack. The first time I realized Martin Holloway thought rules existed for other people, not him. And what happened 3 weeks later made that problem much bigger. 3 weeks later, Martin taped a notice to my door. Not emailed, not mailed, taped. Crooked. Like he wanted people to see it. Interesting. Very interesting. I noticed it the second I stepped out of the elevator. Bright white paper. Large bold letters. Lease violation notice. My stomach dropped instantly. Wrong. Very wrong. Charlie stood beside me while I pulled it down. Noise complaints. Multiple violations. Possible lease enforcement action. No. No, no, no. Noise complaints. Me. Apartment 3B. The woman whose biggest Friday night activity was reheating leftovers and watching documentaries. Interesting. Very interesting. I opened my email. Nothing. No prior warning. No messages. No complaints. No documentation. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Because legitimate processes create records. Martin Holloway owned 6 properties. Not unusual. Interesting, but not unusual. What caught my attention was everything attached to them. County inspection reports, permit records, housing complaints, code violations. Interesting. Very interesting.
I sat at my kitchen table with Charlie asleep beside me and cold coffee I'd forgotten to drink 3 hours earlier. My lawyer brain had fully activated. Dangerous thing about documents, they tell stories, and Martin's story was getting expensive. Property 1, multiple tenant complaints. Property 2, unresolved maintenance violations. Property 3, city citations. Property 4, interesting. Very interesting. 3 prior complaints involving improper notice entries. No. My pulse climbed instantly. Fast. Wrong. Because suddenly, walking into my apartment without notice wasn't a mistake. It was a habit. Patterns matter, especially legal patterns. Then I found something worse. A city housing complaint filed 8 months earlier. Different building, different tenant, same landlord. Allegation: pressure tactics, lease intimidation, retaliatory enforcement. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, I wasn't looking at bad management. I was looking at a system. One that worked. Because people got scared. People moved. People gave up. People didn't know their rights. Martin counted on that. My phone buzzed. Mrs. Ramirez. Can you come downstairs? Her voice sounded nervous. Wrong. Very wrong. 5 minutes later, I was standing inside her apartment. Water stain, kitchen ceiling. Bad one. Very bad. How long? I asked. Almost 6 weeks. 6 weeks. No. Did you report it? She opened a drawer, pulled out papers, printed emails, maintenance requests, photos, dates. Interesting. Very interesting. 23 emails. No repair, no response, nothing. My stomach tightened. Wrong. Very wrong. Then she said something that changed everything. He told me maybe I should move if I don't like it. Interesting. Very interesting. Pressure. Again. Strategy. Again. Pattern. Again. I drove to city records that afternoon, pulled more files, read more complaints, connected more dots. Dangerous thing about arrogant people. They usually repeat themselves. Martin repeated himself a lot. 3 hours later, I had a folder. Not emotional, not opinions, evidence. Timeline, documentation, history, pattern. The exact things people like Martin hate most. That night, an email arrived. From Martin. Subject line: Final lease enforcement warning. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, it looked like Martin Holloway wasn't just making mistakes. He was building a case, a fake one, against the wrong tenant, and he still had absolutely no idea who he was dealing with.
The email arrived at 9:42 p.m. Late enough to make people nervous. Late enough to ruin sleep. Interesting. Very interesting. Subject line: Final lease enforcement warning. Final. Interesting word. Dangerous word. Especially when there was never a first legitimate warning to begin with. I opened it. Slowly. Carefully. My lawyer brain already expected problems. It still surprised me. Repeated lease violations. No documentation. Disruptive conduct. No dates. Failure to comply with community standards. Community standards. Interesting. Very interesting. Corporate language. Vague language. Dangerous language. The kind people use when they want authority without accountability.
Then I noticed the deadline. 7 days. No. 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 My lease required 30. State law required process. Actual process. Not intimidation. Not pressure. Process. Charlie barked near the window. Someone outside. Maintenance. 9:53 p.m.? Wrong. Very wrong. I pulled back the blinds. 2 maintenance workers. Removing something. Interesting. Very interesting. I opened my front door. Fast. Sharp. Controlled. What are you doing? One of them froze. Wrong. The other looked uncomfortable. Good. Very good. Office order. One said quietly. What office order? Silence. Wrong silence. Dangerous silence. My stomach tightened instantly. Parking permit. Mine. They were removing my assigned parking permit. No notice. No email. No explanation. Interesting. Very interesting. Pressure. Again. Strategy. Again. Pattern. Again. I walked downstairs. Martin's office lights were still on. Interesting. Very interesting. He looked up when I entered. Not surprised. Interesting. Very interesting. My parking assignment disappeared. Martin leaned back. Calm. Too calm. Administrative issue. Dangerous phrase. Corporate phrase. Translation: intentional. I'd like it fixed. We'll review it. Dangerous phrase. Again. Interesting. Very interesting. Tonight? Small pause. Interesting pause. No. No. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, he wasn't hiding it anymore. The pressure campaign. The inconvenience. The small disruptions. People leave faster when life gets uncomfortable. Interesting strategy. Expensive strategy. You should pick your battles carefully, Martin said quietly. Dangerous sentence. Very dangerous sentence. Threat disguised as advice. Classic. I smiled. Small. Smile. Dangerous. Smile. Interesting thing about intimidation, it only works when people think you don't know what's happening. I went downstairs, opened my laptop, started a folder. Timeline. Evidence. Photos. Emails. Dates. Every interaction. Every notice. Every missing repair. Every policy violation. Every small thing. Dangerous thing about small things. Eventually, they become evidence. And Martin Holloway was giving me A lot of evidence.
3 days later, my air conditioning stopped working. Interesting. Very interesting. Because outside, it was 92 degrees. Inside, it felt worse. Charlie stretched across the kitchen floor, looking miserable. I checked the thermostat, reset it. Nothing. Breaker panel. Nothing. Maintenance request. Submitted. Timestamp? 9:14 a.m. Simple, normal, reasonable. No response. Interesting. Very interesting. By 2:30 p.m., still nothing. I emailed. Nothing. Called. Voicemail. Again. Nothing. Wrong. Very wrong. Because Martin suddenly moved very quickly when things benefited Martin. Fees. Lease notices. Parking changes. Immediate. Always immediate. Repairs? Silence. At 5:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. Maintenance. Finally. We'll check tomorrow. Tomorrow. Interesting. Very interesting. State housing code required reasonable habitability standards, especially during extreme temperatures. Dangerous thing about law? It doesn't care whether someone feels like responding. I emailed back. Professional. Short. Documented. No emotion. Only facts. No repair response within reasonable time frame. Temperature conditions documented. Request submitted 9:14 a.m. Follow-up submitted 2:34 p.m. Awaiting resolution. Send. Paper trail. Dangerous thing about paper trails? They age beautifully. The next morning, nothing. Interesting. Very interesting. Temperature, 86 inside. Charlie looked miserable. I looked worse. Mrs. Ramirez knocked around noon. They shut off Walter's storage access. Interesting. Very interesting. Walter, retired teacher, plant guy, 7:15 every morning. What happened? He complained about plumbing. No. No, no, no. Pressure. Again. Pattern. Again. Retaliation. Again. Interesting. Very interesting. That afternoon, I walked outside. Walter sat near the courtyard. Quiet. Frustrated. Wrong. Very wrong. He says paperwork changed, Walter said. Paperwork. Interesting word. Dangerous word. Can I see it? He handed me the notice. Administrative update. Storage reassignment. No explanation. No process. Interesting. Very interesting. Pattern. Pressure. Inconvenience. Escalation. People leave faster when home stops feeling safe. Interesting strategy. Expensive strategy. That night, my AC suddenly started working. Interesting. Very interesting. No maintenance visit, no repair, no explanation. Interesting. Dangerous. Because suddenly it felt less like neglect, more like control. And around 11:17 p.m., while organizing documents, I found something Martin definitely didn't expect me to find. Something sitting quietly inside county property filings. Something expensive, very expensive. Because Martin Holloway didn't legally own part of what he was threatening tenants over. And suddenly, this situation got much bigger than fake lease violations.
I read the filing 3 times, then a 4th. Interesting. Very interesting. Because sometimes, when something makes absolutely no sense, you check it again. County ownership records. Maple Terrace Apartments. Owner listed. Holloway Property Holdings, LLC. Normal. Expected. Then, financing documents. Commercial filings. Development agreements. Interesting. Very interesting. My pulse climbed instantly. Fast. Wrong. Because Martin Holloway didn't fully control the property. Not even close. 40% ownership belonged to an investment group. A very large investment group. The kind that absolutely hates legal exposure. Housing violations? Tenant complaints? Improper notices? Potential retaliation? Interesting. Very interesting. Then I found something worse. Management compliance requirements. Buried deep. Easy to miss. Unless you spend years reading contracts professionally. Interesting. Very interesting. Property management disputes? Tenant legal claims? Housing complaints? Required disclosure. Immediate disclosure. Interesting. Because suddenly, Martin might not only have legal problems, he might have investor problems. Dangerous problems. The expensive kind. Charlie barked near the window. Someone outside. Interesting. Very interesting. Martin, walking property. Phone against his ear. Confident. Relaxed. Wrong. Very wrong. Because confidence built on bad information doesn't age well. I printed everything. Ownership filings, compliance agreements, management requirements, timeline documentation, repair records, entry violations, lease notices, pressure tactics, pattern, evidence. Dangerous thing about evidence? It gets heavier over time. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Ms. Bennett? Professional voice. Female. Calm. Dangerous. Yes. This is Jessica from Holloway Property Holdings. Interesting. Very interesting. I'm following up regarding your lease violation status. Status? Interesting word. Dangerous word. I'm reviewing documentation, I said carefully. Silence. Interesting silence. Mr. Holloway indicated you've been difficult. Difficult. Interesting. Very interesting. Funny word. Women get called difficult right around the moment they stop accepting things quietly. What specifically? I asked. Silence. Wrong silence. Dangerous silence. I don't have details. Interesting. Very interesting. No problem, I said quietly. I do. Pause. Small pause. Heavy pause. What does that mean? Good question. Very good question. Because suddenly, something clicked. Jessica. Corporate office? Investment ownership? Compliance obligations? Interesting. Very interesting. Because Martin Holloway might not realize he wasn't the only person managing risk anymore. And risk hates surprises. Especially legal surprises. 2 hours later, my email notification appeared. Sender. Martin Holloway. Subject line. Notice of eviction. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, Martin had officially crossed the line, and he still had absolutely no idea how badly he'd miscalculated. The eviction notice wasn't legal. I knew it immediately. Not because I'm a lawyer. Because it was bad. Very bad. Wrong dates, wrong timeline, wrong filing language. Missing disclosures, missing process, missing court authorization. Interesting. Very interesting. Martin wasn't following eviction law. He was pretending to. Dangerous thing about pretending to understand legal process, eventually you meet someone who actually does. I printed the notice, sat at my kitchen table, coffee, laptop, Charlie asleep beside me. Normal morning. Expensive morning. I highlighted problems. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8. Interesting. Very interesting. Enough mistakes to make opposing counsel nervous. Enough mistakes to make investors nervous. Enough mistakes to make Martin nervous. Eventually. Not yet, but eventually. My phone buzzed. Mrs. Ramirez. There's a notice on Walter's door, too. No. No. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, it wasn't pressure. It wasn't strategy. It was pattern. Again. Walter. Retired teacher. Quiet. Respectful. No issues. No complaints. Interesting targets. Older tenants. Long-term tenants. People less likely to fight back. People more likely to leave. Interesting strategy. Expensive strategy. I knocked on Walter's door. He opened slowly. Notice in hand. Frustrated. Confused. Wrong. Very wrong. He says I violated storage policy, Walter said quietly. Storage policy. Interesting. Very interesting. Same language. Same template. Same pressure. Pattern. Again. Did you violate it? No. Interesting. Very interesting. Of course not. That afternoon, I sent exactly 4 emails. Corporate Ownership Group, Housing Compliance Office, City Tenant Enforcement Division, and Martin Holloway. Interesting. Very interesting. Martin's email was shortest. 3 sentences. Professional, polite, dangerous. Please preserve all records relating to tenant notices, maintenance history, entry records, parking modifications, and lease enforcement actions. Pause. Small pause. Heavy pause. Future communication should remain in writing. Pause. Dangerous pause. Thank you. Send. Dangerous thing about documentation? Sometimes people realize they're in trouble the moment they realized someone else is documenting them. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Martin. Interesting. Very interesting. I answered. Why are you contacting ownership? He asked immediately. No greeting. Interesting. Very interesting. Should I not? Silence. Wrong silence. Dangerous silence. You should have talked to me first. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, for the first time, Martin Holloway didn't sound confident. He sounded nervous. Good. Very good. Because nervous people make mistakes. And Martin was about to make his biggest one yet.
Martin showed up at my apartment the next morning. 7:03 a.m. Interesting. Very interesting. Because people who feel in control don't usually show up before sunrise. People who panic do. Charlie barked before I even reached the door. Sharp. Protective. Smart dog. Very smart dog. I opened the door. Chain lock still on. Martin stood there. No coffee. No fake smile. No developer confidence. Interesting. Very interesting. We need to talk, he said. Need. Interesting word. Dangerous word. Because suddenly, this wasn't management. This was damage control. I prefer email, I said. Professional. Calm. Dangerous. This doesn't need to become a thing. Interesting. Very interesting. Too late. Very too late. I think we're past that. His jaw tightened. Good. Very good. You contacted ownership. Not a question. Interesting. Very interesting. Yes. You contacted compliance. Yes. You contacted tenant enforcement.
Yes. Silence. Wrong. Silence. Dangerous. Silence. Interesting thing about pressure tactics. They stop working when pressure moves the other direction. I think we got off on the wrong foot, Martin said. Interesting. Very interesting. Because people say that right before pretending previous behavior never happened. No, I said quietly. I think we got off on exactly the foot you intended. Silence. Sharp. Silence. Dangerous. Silence. Interesting. Very interesting. Look, Martin said. We can resolve this. Resolve. Interesting word. Dangerous word. Because suddenly, the fake lease notices, the parking issue, the apartment entry, the maintenance delays, the eviction threat, all of it was becoming inconvenient for Martin. Good. Very good. My phone buzzed. Email notification. Corporate ownership group. Interesting. Very interesting. I opened it immediately. Subject. Acknowledgement of compliance review. Interesting. Very expensive. We take allegations involving tenant treatment seriously. Interesting. Very interesting. Formal review initiated. Pause. Heavy pause. Dangerous pause. Martin watched my face carefully. Interesting. Very interesting. What? Good question. Very good question. Ownership opened an investigation. Silence. Wrong silence. Dangerous silence. Interesting thing about assumptions. They collapse fast. No, they didn't. Interesting response. Bad response. Very bad response. I turned my phone. Showed him. Actual email. Actual corporate letterhead. Actual problem. Martin read quietly. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, for the first time since buying Maple Terrace, Martin Holloway looked exactly what he was. A man who thought rules only applied to other people, until they applied to him. You renters always threaten lawyers, he said quietly. Interesting. Very interesting. There it was. The sentence. The assumption. The mistake. Big mistake. Very expensive mistake. I smiled. Small smile. Dangerous smile. Interesting thing about assumptions. They collapse fast. I know, I said quietly. Martin folded his arms. Waiting. Confident. Wrong. Very wrong. Because suddenly, it was finally time. The truth. The one thing Martin Holloway should have known months ago. I know, I said again. Calm. Controlled. dangerous. Because I am one.
Silence. Real silence. The kind that changes rooms. Martin stared at me. Interesting. Very interesting. Not angry, not confident, calculating, dangerous. Because people like Martin don't panic immediately. First, they try to adjust, control, recover, reframe. Interesting. Very interesting. You're a lawyer. Not a question. A problem. Yes. Silence. Wrong silence. Dangerous silence. I didn't know that. Interesting. Very interesting. You never asked. Small pause. Heavy pause. Interesting. Because suddenly, everything changed. Not legally. That had changed weeks ago. Emotionally, power shifted. People feel it. Immediately. We can work something out, Martin said. Interesting. Very interesting. Funny. How fast final lease enforcement warnings become work something out. No, I said quietly. No. No. Sharp. Controlled. Dangerous. Documentation exists. Silence. Tenant complaints exist. Silence. Improper notices exist. Silence. Entry violations exist. Silence. Retaliation concerns exist. Silence. Interesting. Very interesting. People underestimate calm. Calm scares guilty people. You're overreacting. Interesting. Very interesting. Classic. Pressure doesn't work. Minimize, deflect, normalize. Dangerous. Strategy. Bad strategy. Especially now. No, I said quietly. I think you underestimated your tenants. Interesting. Very interesting. He folded his arms tighter. Wrong. Very wrong. Because defensive people stop thinking clearly. Dangerous thing about arrogance. Eventually, it convinces people they're smarter than process. Martin believed process was optional. Paperwork, notice requirements, documentation, housing protections, tenant rights, optional. Interesting belief. Very expensive belief. My phone buzzed. Again. Compliance office. Interesting. Very interesting. Email. New email. Subject. Request for supporting documentation. Interesting. Very expensive. Maintenance records. Entry authorization logs. Lease enforcement history. Tenant communication files. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, someone else wanted answers too. And Martin didn't have good answers. Charlie barked. Smart dog. Very smart dog. Martin looked toward the stairs. Neighbors watching. Interesting. Very interesting. Mrs. Ramirez. Walter. Apartment 2C. People noticing. People talking. Interesting thing about pressure. Eventually, it changes direction. We'll talk later, Martin said quietly. No confidence. No developer energy. Interesting. Very interesting. No, I said calm, controlled, dangerous. We won't. He walked away, fast. Wrong. Very wrong. Because suddenly, for the first time, Martin Holloway wasn't managing tenants. He was managing exposure. Legal exposure. Financial exposure. Corporate exposure. Interesting. Very expensive. And 3 hours later, my phone rang. Unknown number. Interesting. Very interesting. I answered. Professional voice. Corporate voice. Dangerous voice. Ms. Bennett? Yes. This is legal counsel representing Holloway Property Holdings. Pause. Heavy pause. Dangerous pause. We'd like to discuss Mr. Holloway. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, Martin Holloway's biggest problem wasn't me anymore. It was the people who owned 40% of his building.
Miss Bennett? This is legal counsel representing Holloway Property Holdings. We'd like to discuss concerns involving Maple Terrace. Interesting. Very interesting. I close my laptop slowly. Coffee untouched. Charlie asleep near the window. Normal morning. Not normal situation. We'd like to discuss concerns involving Maple Terrace. Concerns. Interesting word. Corporate word. Dangerous word. Because companies rarely say problem. They say concern. Issue. Review. Assessment. Safer words. Expensive meanings. I'm listening, I said. Professional. Careful. Controlled. Pause. Small pause. Heavy pause. We've opened a formal compliance investigation. Interesting. Very interesting. Multiple issues have been raised. Interesting. Very expensive. Improper apartment entries. Maintenance failures. Lease enforcement concerns. Tenant treatment concerns. Documentation irregularities. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, Martin's small pressure campaign didn't look small anymore. It looked systemic. Dangerous word. Very dangerous word. We'd also like to discuss your documentation. Good. Very good. Documentation matters. Always. Emails, photos, timeline, maintenance requests, lease notices, parking changes, entry incidents, evidence. Dangerous thing about evidence, it stays calm. People panic. Evidence doesn't. We may also need tenant contact information, corporate counsel said. Interesting. Very interesting. Other tenants. Walter. Mrs. Ramirez. Apartment TC. Pattern. Again. Because pressure strategies only work until enough people compare experiences. Then suddenly, patterns appear. Interesting. Very expensive. That afternoon, Martin knocked on my door. Quiet. Nervous. Wrong. Very wrong. They called me, he said. Corporate ownership. Interesting. Very interesting. Mrs. Ramirez, too. Apartment 2C2. Interesting. Very expensive. Because suddenly, this wasn't one tenant dispute. This wasn't personality conflict. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was process, policy, exposure, corporate risk, dangerous things, very dangerous things. 3 days later, maintenance trucks arrived. Interesting. Very interesting. Fast. Very fast. Mrs. Ramirez's ceiling. Fixed. Walter's plumbing. Fixed. Storage access restored. Interesting. Very interesting. Funny. How quickly things happen once people start documenting them. My parking permit returned too. Interesting. Very interesting. No explanation. No apology. Interesting. Corporate ownership sent another email Friday afternoon. Subject: Interim management adjustments. Interesting. Very interesting. Martin Holloway. Removed from direct tenant oversight pending investigation. Pause. Small pause. Heavy pause. Interesting. Very interesting. Charlie barked near the window. Smart dog. Very smart dog. Outside, Martin stood near the parking lot, phone against his ear, pacing. Fast. Wrong. Very wrong. Interesting thing about pressure? Eventually, it finds its way back. And suddenly, for the first time since Martin bought Maple Terrace, the building felt quiet again, safe again, normal again, almost. Because one problem still remained: the eviction, the sheriff, the paperwork. And Martin Holloway still hadn't learned how expensive fake legal process becomes when someone decides not to leave.
The sheriff came back 6 days later. Interesting. Very interesting. But this time, He came alone. No Martin, no confidence, no pressure, no audience. Interesting. Very interesting. Charlie barked once, then stopped. Smart dog. Very smart dog. I opened the door. The sheriff adjusted paperwork in his hand. Professional. Careful. Different. Interesting. Very interesting. Ms. Bennett, he said. Morning. I need to discuss the filing from last week. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, I already knew people don't come back calmly when things are going well. The filing has been withdrawn. Pause. Small pause. Heavy pause. Interesting. Very interesting. Withdrawn. Interesting word. Legal word. Expensive word. Because suddenly, someone finally reviewed process, actual process, court process, notice requirements, documentation, evidence. Interesting thing about legal systems, they move slowly until suddenly they don't. The court identified deficiencies, he said carefully. Deficiencies. Interesting corporate cousin to mistake. Dangerous word. Useful word. Professional word. Wrong paperwork. Wrong filing procedure. Improper documentation. Interesting. Very interesting. Martin Holloway, the man who loved pressure, had officially created pressure for himself. Thank you, I said. Professional. Controlled. Calm. Dangerous. The sheriff nodded. Small nod. Interesting. Very interesting. Off the record, he said quietly. Dangerous sentence. Very dangerous sentence. Good thing you checked. Interesting. Very interesting. Good thing. Yes. Very good thing. Because people leave. People panic. People assume authority means correctness. Dangerous assumption. Expensive assumption. That afternoon, another email arrived. Corporate ownership. Subject. Property management update. Interesting. Very interesting. I opened it slowly. Professional language, corporate language, dangerous language. Effective immediately, outside management oversight would assume operational responsibility. Interesting. Very interesting. Martin Holloway, removed. Pending investigation. Interesting. Very expensive. Mrs. Ramirez knocked 20 minutes later, Walter behind her, smiling. Interesting. Very interesting. We heard, Walter said. Of course they heard. Apartment buildings hear everything. Interesting. Very interesting. Walter smiled. First real smile I'd seen in weeks. Mrs. Ramirez hugged me. Unexpected. Dangerous. Because suddenly, for the first time in months, the building felt lighter. Safer. Normal. Interesting thing about standing up for yourself, sometimes you stand up for people beside you too. That night, I sat beside the bay window. Charlie asleep nearby. Quiet building. Safe building. Interesting. Very interesting. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again.
Interesting. Very interesting, I answered. Professional voice. Male voice. Controlled. Dangerous. Ms. Bennett? Yes. My name is Daniel Ross. Pause. Small pause. Heavy pause. I'm legal counsel for Martin Holloway. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, Martin Holloway finally hired a lawyer. And what Daniel Ross said next changed everything.
My name is Daniel Ross. I'm legal counsel for Martin Holloway. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, the man who ignored process wanted process. The man who ignored documentation wanted documentation. Funny. Very funny. What can I help you with? I said. Professional, controlled, dangerous. Small silence. Interesting silence. My client would like to resolve this matter privately. Private. Interesting word. Dangerous word. Because usually, private means expensive. He understands mistakes were made. Mistakes. Interesting. Very interesting. Wrong notices, improper entries, pressure tactics, retaliation. Interesting definition of mistake. My client is prepared to discuss resolution. Resolution. Dangerous corporate cousin to consequence. I see, I said quietly. Interesting thing about leverage, people only notice it when they lose it. Then Daniel said something unexpected. Corporate ownership expanded review. Interesting. Very interesting. Additional properties, additional complaints, additional tenants. Interesting. Very expensive. 3 buildings, 7 complaints, maintenance issues, improper notices. Pattern. Again, dangerous thing about patterns. Eventually, they become evidence. Corporate ownership wasn't protecting Martin anymore. They were protecting themselves. Interesting. Very interesting. We'd like to avoid litigation, Daniel said carefully. Interesting sentence. Dangerous sentence. Because suddenly, litigation existed. Real litigation. Real exposure. Real consequences. What exactly are you asking for? I said. Pause. Heavy pause. My client is prepared to withdraw all actions, provide written correction, reimburse documented expenses, and enter resolution discussions. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, the man who wanted me gone needed me cooperative. Funny. Very funny. Then Daniel said something even more interesting. Corporate ownership may remove Mr. Holloway entirely. Pause. Heavy pause. Interesting. Very expensive. Because suddenly, Martin Holloway wasn't fighting tenants anymore. He was fighting consequences. And consequences don't negotiate emotionally. They arrive. Eventually. Always. 2 weeks later, Martin Holloway was gone. Interesting. Very interesting. No announcement, no speech, no dramatic goodbye. Just gone. Corporate ownership sent an official notice. Outside management company taking over immediately. New maintenance team, new tenant communication process, new reporting system. Interesting. Very interesting. Funny how quickly systems improve once someone important starts paying attention. Mrs. Ramirez got her ceiling repaired properly. Walter got his storage access restored permanently. Apartment 2C finally got plumbing repairs. Interesting. Very interesting. Things that somehow felt impossible before suddenly happened very fast. Funny how that works. 3 weeks later, Daniel Ross called again. Interesting. Very interesting. Corporate ownership reached a final decision, he said. Professional, controlled, dangerous. Mr. Holloway will no longer oversee tenant operations. Pause. Small pause. Heavy pause. Interesting. Very expensive. And due to compliance findings, ownership is restructuring management responsibilities entirely. Interesting. Very interesting. Corporate language. Safe language. Translation: Martin lost. Big. Not because I destroyed him. Not because I wanted revenge. Because actions create consequences. Interesting thing about consequences: they don't care whether someone meant well, only what happened. People kept asking me the same question. Was it worth fighting? Interesting question. Very interesting. Because honestly, there were moments I almost didn't. Moments I thought, maybe just move. Maybe leave quietly. Maybe avoid stress. Interesting. Very interesting. Because that's exactly what people like Martin count on. Exhaustion, fear, pressure, silence. People leaving quietly. But here's the thing. Kind people are not weak people. Quiet people are not powerless people. And knowing your rights can change everything. 2 months later, I walked past Martin in the parking lot. Interesting. Very interesting. First time since everything happened. No expensive confidence, no pressure, no fake authority. Just quiet. He looked at me. Small nod. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly, the man who once thought rules existed for other people finally understood they existed for him too. Charlie barked beside me. Smart dog. Very smart dog. I smiled. Small smile. Dangerous smile. Then kept walking. Because sometimes winning isn't making someone lose. Sometimes winning is refusing to leave when someone unfairly tries to make you disappear. And if you've ever had a landlord, boss, or anyone with power try to pressure you into staying quiet, tell me in the comments. And subscribe. Because sometimes the people who underestimate you most become the people who teach you exactly how strong you are. 6 months later, I almost forgot Martin Holloway existed. Almost. Interesting. Very interesting. Life does that. The things that once feel enormous eventually become background noise. Maple Terrace felt different. Lighter. Quiet again. Safe again. New management actually answered emails. Maintenance requests got handled. People smiled more. Interesting. Very interesting. Mrs. Ramirez started baking again. Walter watered plants every morning. 7:15. Exactly. Some things deserve staying the same. Then, one Tuesday, something unexpected happened. I got a letter. Physical letter. Interesting. Very interesting. From corporate ownership. Short, professional, dangerous. They were conducting final closure procedures regarding prior management issues. Interesting. Very corporate. Very expensive. Attached, summary findings. Limited summary. Careful language. Corporate language. But enough. More than enough. Compliance failures. Documentation concerns. Tenant handling concerns.
Improper operational practices. Interesting. Very interesting. Translation. Pattern confirmed. Not misunderstanding. Not bad luck. Pattern. Then one line stopped me. Completely. Corrective action prevented expansion of exposure. Interesting. Very interesting. Exposure. Corporate word. Dangerous word. Translation. If nobody fought back, it would have gotten worse. More tenants, more pressure, more people quietly leaving. Interesting. Very interesting. I sat near the bay window, Charlie asleep beside me, coffee getting cold. Again. Funny, life repeats itself. Except, this time, peace felt different. Stronger. Earned. Interesting thing about standing up for yourself, the first time feels terrifying. The second time, less terrifying. Then eventually, you stop apologizing for protecting yourself. Funny how that works. A few days later, Mrs. Ramirez knocked on my door, a small plan in her hand. Lavender. She said quietly, "Thank you. Interesting. Very interesting." "No problem," I said. But honestly, it wasn't true, because it had been a problem. A big one. The difference was learning problems don't automatically become defeat. Not if you document. Not if you ask questions. Not if you refuse pressure disguised as authority. People assume confidence means competence. It doesn't. People assume authority means correctness. It doesn't. And people assume quiet people won't fight back. Interesting. Very interesting. Sometimes quiet people simply wait, watch, document, and when the time comes, they speak carefully, clearly, expensively. Charlie barked once near the window. Smart dog. Very smart dog. I smiled, small smile, peaceful smile, then opened my laptop. Back to work, back to life, back to normal, exactly where I belonged.